Many a man have asked when philosophy and law joined part. So we travel back to Athens, where democracy took start. It came long after the Republic, scorning the individual aside. They hunted down the thinkers, the greatest of them dying for his pride. In the annals of legal history, one defendant puts them all to shame. He's every bit as brave as the time from which he came. The great philosopher Socrates is no stranger to our lore. His trial and his punishment touches every part of law. Make no mistake about this, by Napoleonic or interpretive creation, Socrates' trial is the ultimate definition. His accusers forced him to drink the poison, and it was a lethal shot, casting him to heaven and breaking Athens' heart. But in this came rebellion. The city was consumed. His plight drew reservations. His enemies were doomed. The democracy by fire, for that he stood appalled, saw its henchmen angry. The dictatorship would fall. In the tragedy of Socrates, there's a lesson for us all, a self-investigation every person should pay call. There's a time to live and a time to die, a time for us to laugh, another for to cry. If we're to enjoy these wonders and keep about our sinew, there's one important ritual, a duty we must do. Socrates showed us truth and justice go hand in hand, and even if corrupted, you have to be a man. To honor and obey the law, even if to die, is the greatest introspective. For that we look inside. To die for our convictions, to know truly who we are, is what this genius wanted, that our virtues travel far. His thoughts transcended nations, empires, and space. Now every single person knows this man's ugly face. And man, Socrates was one ugly dude. They asked Socrates, they said, why is it that such a great man as yourself has such an ugly, overbearing wife? And his response was something to the effect of, I have a penchant for taming wild horses. The barefooted philosopher running through the streets of Athens, Greece. Man, he was a character indeed, and he is the most significant defendant in any court of law, the first pro se. And he died for his convictions. So stay tuned, because we're here on a special edition of American Advocate. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. Live and live in color. But if you're a truck driver or a taxi driver or otherwise in your vehicle, you can just listen to this like a radio show, as there's nothing visual that needs comprehension except for my face, the second ugliest in the world, next to my main man Socrates, because this mug is pug ugly certified. But Socrates, he's the undisputed world champion. I gotta give the brother his due. Ain't that right? We gotta put it out for the people to see, because the people have a right to know.
Benjamin Irish. Love him or hate him, he has had an effect on a major American company.
I have a lot of disdain for the total lack of accountability, irresponsibility, and corruption.
Mr. Irish is back again with a precedent-setting case.
$100 million lawsuit.
Benjamin Irish, he was a signatory to the unity agreement between the United States and the Dominican Republic.
There are apparent authority laws in this country. You know, if you work for a company and you go out in the company car and you hit and you kill somebody on the way home, the company is reasonably responsible for your actions.
And you seem fearless in your pursuit of giving those that don't have a voice a voice.
Now, are all these incidents connected? You have one chemical agent that's killing all these people.
Right.
Well, what is it? Who's doing this?
I'm sick of all this garbage, removing the words "in God we trust" from the oath of the United States Congress. Give me a break.
Why do you have politicians that need to raise $5 million, $6 million, $10 million for positions that pay $60,000 a year. Corruption is the real pandemic. Large portions of our court system have fallen apart, but large portions are still operating.
The case you've been allowed to represent for, which is sort of unprecedented, isn't it?
These women had a right to receive that. They did this to these people while the trial was going on. This is just an old world organized crime smash and grab. It's against hardworking, decent people. These people were healthcare workers. These people were seamstresses. These people were put into the freezing cold New York streets. You know, we've exposed these people. They're before the federal court. There was a DEA investigation. There were arrests. Yeah, we're going to get these guys, and they deserve it too.
We are a free country. We are a free people, and they want Americans afraid. Well, we can't be intimidated, and we can't be afraid, and we need to stand up and fight this evil.
I can't believe this stuff is even an issue still. In this day and age, who's a leader of the people? I don't want to hear about who's a leader of black people and who's a leader of white people. I just want to hear about who the leader of the people is. The people in general, because we're all in this together.
I'm so proud of every single person, the thousands of people that came here tonight, everybody who came out here tonight to show their support to bring the principles back to the United States of America. Thank you for coming here tonight. USA! 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 USA!
Benjamin Irish here. Welcome to the podcast. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons at the bottom of the screen. That helps our channel to grow, and we greatly appreciate it. Brief disclaimer before we start today's episode. I am not an attorney. I am a legal advocate specializing in constitutional rights. No information herein should be construed as legal advice. It is purely educational and historical.
All these law school students, the first thing they seem to ask about is the Socratic Method and the uses of philosophy in the law. And Socrates is a huge figure, both as it relates to every single piece of philosophy that came after him, as well as every jury trial. To begin this episode, I want to make a disclaimer that this is not a show about the legal Socratic Method that they teach in law schools and that zestful young attorneys attempt to utilize in court in mass all across this country. Nope, this is about the big concept, the big picture as to why Socrates continues to be a game changer over 2,000 years after his demise in courts all over the world. And still, forgive me, I have to clear my throat and pontificate just a tad about the method and why so many people seek answers to its construction. I've searched for quite a few days for a really good video article about the Socratic Method, but there's just about nada in this regard. And the few videos that are out there, well, they're about as exciting as a colonoscopy. So for the law school hopefuls and those attending classes, the few, the proud, the brave who are sitting through a 17th showing of the paper chase, looking to see if they can piece together little clues as to Socratic Method, here's what you need to know about the pulse of the method. Socratic Method is not just a teaching technique or a strategy to garnish conflicting statements from witnesses. It's a technique that's organic to us all, and it's simply an interrogation Socrates walked the streets of Athens all day, essentially interrogating people, asking them leading questions, or at least this is what history teaches us. He did this the same way DAs ask witness verification and yes or no questions during a trial to get an admission from the witness. So too did Socrates question the people of Athens. So Socratic Method is not exclusive to your law school studies. It's just something you need to be vigilant of and prepared for, and any attorney worth his salt always is ready to stand up in the court and say, "Your Honor, this questioning is going nowhere." The Socratic Method is best learned by understanding its purpose is to trick the opposing side into making admissions. That's Socratic Method. If you call it methodology, in Socrates and his trial, everyone is something worth studying in depth for lots of reasons, because Socrates to law is just as important as the overall experience to your law school studies is, say, versus just passing exams. On that note, let's begin. Socrates is applicable in law profoundly because Socrates philosophized about virtues and about character and ran through the streets with no shoes on, badgering the people he encountered with questions that made them ask their purpose and if they were living their lives correctly and with the proper virtue needed to meet those ends. Take it easy. No, he was not charged with panhandling, but he did live off of others, and his prosecution, therefore, is a classic example of people who have money using the courts as a stalking horse to justice and prosecuting their competition. Socrates was convicted of subversion crimes. Socrates sought the truth. His questions, although not documented in any significant verbatim way of the time they occurred, are all inquiries into the truth of the subject's condition. Socrates investigated and deposed his subjects in a study of their fiber. He's imagined to have proffered questions about a man's wants and a man's needs, and if the man would seek to obtain these wants and needs, and what did he have in his character and individual life that would make this with or without logic. Obviously, a man who was a drunk, for example, would be regarded as less capable of reaching personal and professional heights or win a trial by that matter. Get it? The human condition as studied is the backbone of jury trials, and this is the ironic fate of Socrates, for he was sentenced to death by suicide by a jury. Still, Socrates the philosopher was foremost a seeker of the truth. He was not an atheist, rather he worshipped a divine power, and God's laws unto man played a part in his defense. He was a pro se, and funny enough, Socrates was a famous defendant. He was a celebrity who was put on trial, a public trial, and the burden of proof was against him. The case was a setup, and he didn't stand a chance and became a martyr. Socrates was murdered for the political purpose of retaining power. We're seeing lots of this today in the law, and Socrates is a great influence for constitutional and human rights causes the world over. And I don't mean as a marketing tool that lawyers use to enthrall judges. I discuss how Socrates inspired people who are seeking justice because his story is coursing to justice. Trust me, the last thing you want is a lawyer reminding a judge of their early law school days during your trial. Socrates was charged because politicians and the government were afraid of him. Remember, these people fear intelligence. And Socrates was charged with encouraging people to think for themselves and to be their own individual persons because he asked them to look deep inside themselves to realize their potential and what they are capable of. The government wanted people docile. It wanted them to be motor hands and nothing more than numbers so they could continue their corrupt ways. There's no doubt in my mind that Socrates' death sentence and the outcome of his trial were decided long before he stood in front of a jury. This was a fixed case. But Socrates was adamant in dying not for his belief, but what he insisted was the truth. He didn't believe he was innocent of the charges. He knew this, and he attributed it to the law. There are two important parts of his refusal to back off when up against what was the law at the time. First, reading the law versus a trial by fire, as it were, precedented a respect for the law as it was constitutionalized. And Greece and the surrounding countries at the time had their own constitutions and quasi-constitutions. In fact, this was discussed at his trial as Socrates' friend offered to go AWOL with him to escape death, which Socrates declined, with Socrates holding that the law must be followed in form to give it the greatest ability in enforcement, even if that willingness to obey its form and application fails to make a just end. Socrates did not believe in the very currently popular concept of deciding cases on the basis of how it would affect all cases before and especially after that decision is reached. Although I have seen some law school professors erroneously tout the IRAC system as a Socratic method of judicial activism. This is wrong, because no judicial activist would accept a conviction without merit, or for that matter, accept the death sentence on those terms. And in fact, Socrates was profuse in his obedience of law, even if it was not just. The idea that Socrates was a judicial activist betrays constitutionalism, but in these days of social law, as they're calling this collapse of our rights, continuing to debate these ill-educated teachers would be fruitless. Fruitful, however, is the evidence standard and the trial preparation techniques learned from Socrates, how we learn from the mistakes of others. And I like to equate Socrates' mistakes that made his wrongful death sentence to the movie producers and cinematographers that get a whole bunch of old Mexican films or films from Nollywood in Nigeria to learn what not to do, so they can avoid learning those hard lessons when making their first film or their reel. Socrates is the ultimate example of a pro se, because he was a pro se and he never wrote anything down. In fact, the great philosopher never had a published work, and his work, his philosophy, was the cause of his prosecution. He was on trial for what he philosophized, the government claiming he'd corrupted people's minds with seditious ideas, and Socrates, a true minimalist, had no proof of the true content of his work. And this is a big legal lesson about evidence in civil cases as well. Intellectual property creation, contracts, you name it, all of it. You can have the most sensational case in the entire world. You can be the most just and have had something truly deserving of large recompense done against you. But if you don't have evidence to prove up your claims, you don't have squat. That's why we get evidence, right? Socrates could bring all sorts of third parties to make unqualified statements about the content of his philosophy, for which he was on trial, but none of those statements would be persuasive against the statements of the government. The evidence of the prosecuting party is always viewed in the most favorable light, even this way today. If law school students, newbie attorneys, and pro ses want to walk away with one thing from this video, it should be that Socrates' philosophy is a sad example of do as I say, not as I do. Because Socrates ingrained in us the most important of all human endeavors, the need, the true need, to look inside ourselves and realize our potential and the potential of the things that we're doing with our lives. But he failed to activate that full potential for himself in his own life. Afterward, his martyrdom is prophetic in very many ways. The introspective command from the man with his ear to the street, as they say, for judiciaries would be to examine your case before filing and going to trial, and to prepare for trial diligently. One final thought before we close this episode out. And if we discuss Socrates again and the butchering of cases, maybe we'll do it like a sequel to a slasher movie, like Socrates Returns with a Jason Voorhees mask on the podcast logo, or we can superimpose his image on a Bruce Lee body. You guys can comment below and we'll see if there's another Socrates episode. Now, the final thought is that Socrates held the belief that we had to respond with obedience to the legal process, even if the legal process was interpreting what laws meant. Socrates left no room for construction of new laws, and this doctrine, a personal part of him, was flawed. However, lots of young legal enthusiasts who have probably never argued a case before the courts or a jury for that matter are excusing that this obedience constitutes decisions by the court on the effect it would have on cases that come after it. This, friends, is the absolute antithesis of the spirit of Socrates, which is the spirit of trying cases on their individual merit and not setting precedent to push through future cases without looking at the elements unique to the parties. This is a dangerous doctrine being used by less than honorable attorneys in courts and has to be stopped. Socrates challenges us to think. My daughter had heard about Socrates when she was in the 3rd grade, maybe a little earlier actually, and ran around with me everywhere saying, "I think, therefore I am." And this is very important. It's also important to cultivate evidence, prepare for trial, and record your work because, hey, you don't want people to say that you never thought before filing your case. And you don't want to wind up like our old buddy Socrates, being forced to drink a cup of hemlock and poisoning yourself because your opinions differed from that of the government. And people wonder why Socrates is such an influence today. Also want to say a special hello to all the truck drivers across the country and throughout Canada who have said they popped the channel on while driving, making the most of their time on the road. You guys and you gals, keep up the good fight. And also to our friends in India. That is one part of the world that I would love to see and that I've never been to. And if I ever get over there, I'd love to meet up with some of the viewers of this channel, the young, budding judiciaries who are striving to be lawyers and judicial officials over there. We love hearing from you. We love hearing from everybody. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button on the bottom of the screen. Please sign up for notifications, as all of that helps our channel to grow. We appreciate your help, and everybody check out a book a day and a case a day videos on this channel. Knowledge is power, and going into life without a war chest of knowledge is like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Until next time, take care of yourself.
Benjamin Irish here. In these hard times, unfortunately, our four-legged friends are often forgotten about. Please make it a point every single holiday to donate 20 pounds or more of animal food to your local animal shelter. These guys would ask you for it, but they don't have words. Isn't that right, Zoe? Isn't that right, Zeus? You guys are ready for your walk? Can I get kissy wishy, mommy? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. You're gonna give me? Oh, you gave me a kissy too. Mwah. Love you guys. Aww. Please donate 20 pounds of animal food to your local shelter every single holiday. Let's go for a walk, guys. Let's go for a walkie walk. Let's go for a walkie walk. Waste. Hey, you guys did so good.